make a difference and move on to something new ahead. Just you put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be doing just what Granny D has said. Whoa, whoa. If you want to get folks all together for a timely task to work as...
I have to say that she has been an influence in that not only is she kind of a sort of spiritual leader for us all, a kind of muse, inspiration, but I think she also makes me feel, anyway, that our efforts really are very, very possible. If an 88-year-old woman can walk across the country, garner national attention, what can a larger movement do? I very much believe that this is something that has to happen, this reform of government. Otherwise, nothing is really possible. So I feel it's of utmost importance, and I believe that we can really accomplish something here. And it's largely due to that grand old lady.
People in their towns beneath the sun.
Underneath the sun.
Well, you know you gotta put one foot in front of the other.
In front of the other.
I think mostly she served as a reminder to me that fixing this entrenched and broken system is really about individual contact with other people and building a movement from below, and that it's not going to happen from above, and that means getting out and being with real people the way Granny D did, and organizing a mass movement to get money out of politics.
And you'll be doing just what Granny D has done.
Granny D has done. Walking down.
I guess I was kind of a regular high school kid when Granny D walked into my life. I was going to high school in Peterborough. She lived next door in Dublin, and she spoke at commencement about this issue of campaign finance reform and about walking across the country. She was over 90 years old, and that made a pretty big impression. And in the years after that, I had the opportunity to march with her a couple times, to speak with her many times, to watch her get arrested in the U.S. Capitol, fighting for campaign finance reform. And I figured if she, a little over 5 feet tall, over 90 years old, could take up this fight, I, in my 20s, certainly had to do my part.
I'll tell you about how I first heard about Granny D. It's Christmas of 1999, and I'm in the living room having a glass of wine before 20 people go into dinner in southwestern Connecticut, and I'm talking to the husband of my partner's niece. His name's Joe Haddock, and somehow we got onto the conversation of reforming our government, and he started to tell me about this crazy grandmother that he had this harebrained idea that she was going to walk across the whole country for campaign finance reform, and the family couldn't talk her out of it. And they had raised all kinds of objections. How are you going to do it? Walk 6 days a week, 10 miles a day. Can you do that? Prove it. So she went out and did it, 10 miles a day for a week. And off she went. Well, how are you going to sleep out? I'll just sleep out under the stars. Can you do that? Sure. She hoisted up her sleeping bag and a backpack and hiked 2 days, stayed overnight, and came back. And every time they would try and slow her down, she jumped over. So he said, okay, my job in New York City is building websites for big corporations. I'll build you a website, Granny. And it happened that we were talking 7 days before she began at the Rose Bowl on January 1st. So that's how I met Granny D.
All together for a timely task to
people ask me how I got involved with Granny D, campaign finance reform, what made me do anything, the first thing I say is, well, that woman ruined my life. And my husband says the same thing now. Because after reading her journal, which had been turned into a book with her and Dennis Burke working on it, I could never again say I was too old or it was too late to do something. And she has an incredible way of saying, listen, you either do something that you have a passion for, that you believe in, or if you don't, then those things that you think are harmful, it's just like you stepped over to their side.
One thing Granny D used to say is, she had this quote, democracy, it's not what you have, it's what you do. And she set an incredible example for how we do democracy, how we treat it as a verb, and get out and put even our lives on the line, as she did over the age of 90, walking and continuing the fight.
Then, and when I read about her, and I think one of the things that really made a difference for me, and one of the reasons I wanted to tell her story, is that she didn't pretend to be perfect. And she really did hurt someone she cared about very much, that she talks about in the book. But look what she did. Look what she did.
One thing Granny D recognized is this wasn't just democracy as an end in itself. This was people's lives that motivated her and that ought to motivate us in this work. Throughout her 90s, she continued to campaign for a variety of issues related to democracy and political voice, but she would travel around the country and attend rallies and marches for especially low-income and working women who struggled to exercise the right to vote, who had major barriers in the way of their political participation. And she really saw the human side to these problems.
Well, I met Granny D about 8 years ago when she gave, as a charity, a walk to anyone who wanted to bid on it, and our book group bid on it. This was after she'd walked across the country, and she was still giving to people freely, and that has inspired me, because I feel that giving, you get more than you take. And she spent the time we walked teaching us about ferns. She didn't want to just waste her time walking on the road. She loved talking. She talked to us all about her walk across America and about her family and about her life and about how she'd been inspired to keep fighting even though she felt she was close to the end of her life.
I also loved the audacity of what she was doing, the proposition of walking across the entire country. And as people probably know, at one point she passed out from heat exhaustion in the desert, and she, was hospitalized for that. I mean, it was a real journey. It was not easy for her. And there's something about that kind of, I don't want to sound morbid, but there's something about that kind of suffering that I think people find compelling. If some 90-year-old woman had decided that she was going to walk across, Florida or something like that, wouldn't be a big deal. But there's something about her walking across the entire country that's really stunning. And I don't know how many people know this, but when she got to the Appalachian Mountains, she actually was cross-country skiing through the mountains. So that too is pretty cool for a 90-year-old woman to do. So what compels me most about Doris is that she was such a soulful and poetic person, in addition to being a brave person. And when she spoke, whether it was a written speech or even just off the cuff, She had a certain poise and posture and eloquence that made people sit up and not just listen, but really immediately connect with her in a kind of spiritual and soulful way. And I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like her since then, but never anyone who really just could draw you in as quickly as Doris could draw you in with her humanity and with her sense of purpose and just her love, basically. So I think that kind of even beyond the Granny D story of walking across America, there's the Doris Haddock, the woman behind Granny D, who was just a dear and compelling person, no matter what.
Even more important than campaign finance reform is the fact that she illustrates the power of one. And that old lady said, "You're never too old to raise a little hell."